Respect is not something you demand in a moment. It is something you build over time through patterns that people can observe, measure, and trust. Human psychology is wired to respond not to what you say once, but to what you repeatedly do. Anyone can claim confidence, strength, or integrity in a single sentence, but very few can demonstrate those qualities consistently enough for others to believe them. And belief is the foundation of respect. When people interact with you, their brains are constantly scanning for consistency. They are asking silent questions. Does this person mean what they say? Do their actions match their words? Can I predict how they will behave tomorrow based on how they act today? The more predictable and aligned your behavior is, the more your presence becomes stable in their mind. Stability creates trust, and trust evolves into respect. Think about someone who constantly changes their stance, their tone, or their standards depending on the situation. One day they are confident, the next day they are unsure. One moment they set boundaries, the next they allow those same boundaries to be crossed. This inconsistency creates confusion, and confusion erodes respect. The human mind does not attach value to what it cannot understand or rely on. In contrast, someone who shows up with the same level of discipline, calmness, and self-control regardless of circumstances becomes mentally categorized as dependable, and that dependability carries weight. Consistency is also deeply connected to credibility. When your actions align with your words over time, people stop questioning you. They no longer need proof in every interaction because your history has already provided it. This reduces friction in communication and elevates your status without you having to say a single extra word. It's not about convincing people in the moment. It's about removing the need to convince them at all. There is also a subtle psychological mechanism at play called behavioral reinforcement. Every time you act in alignment with your values, you reinforce an image in the minds of others. For example, if you consistently remain calm under pressure, people begin to associate you with stability. If you consistently follow through on commitments, people associate you with reliability. Over time, these associations become automatic. People don't think about whether you are reliable, they assume it. And assumptions are powerful because they shape how people treat you before you even act. Another layer to this is self-regulation. Consistent behavior requires internal control. It means you are not reacting impulsively to every emotion, situation, or external trigger. Instead, you operate based on principles rather than moods. This is where most people fail, because it is easy to act with discipline when things are going well, but much harder when you are tired, frustrated, or challenged. Yet those are the exact moments when people are watching the most. Pressure reveals patterns, and the patterns you reveal under pressure define how others perceive your strength. People respect those who can maintain their standards even when it is inconvenient. This signals that your behavior is not temporary or situational, it is part of who you are. And when something becomes part of your identity, it becomes powerful. It stops being an effort and starts being a baseline. There is also an important distinction between intensity and consistency. Many people try to earn respect through bursts of effort. They might be extremely disciplined for a short period, highly motivated for a few days, or very confident in certain situations. But intensity fades. Consistency, on the other hand, compounds. Small, repeated actions over time create a stronger impression than occasional displays of excellence. The mind values patterns over peaks. Imagine someone who is polite, composed, and respectful in every interaction, no matter how small. Over time, this behavior becomes expected. Now compare that to someone who is only respectful when it benefits them or when they are in a good mood. The difference is clear. One creates a stable identity, the other creates uncertainty, and people naturally gravitate towards stability. Another psychological factor is emotional memory. People may forget what you said, but they rarely forget how you made them feel over repeated interactions. If your behavior is consistent, the emotional experience you create for others becomes predictable. This predictability builds comfort, and comfort builds respect, not because you are trying to impress anyone, but because you have removed the chaos from your presence. Consistency also signals discipline, and discipline is universally respected. It shows that you are in control of yourself, and self-control is one of the strongest indicators of personal power. When people see that you can manage your actions regardless of external circumstances, they begin to view you as someone who operates above impulse. This creates a natural hierarchy where you are perceived as grounded and others adjust their behavior accordingly. It is important to understand that consistency does not mean perfection. It means alignment. You don't need to be flawless, but you need to be coherent. Your actions, words, and values should point in the same direction. When they do, your presence becomes clear and easy to interpret, and clarity is something people respect because it removes doubt. There is also a long-term effect that many overlook. Consistent behavior builds a reputation, and reputation works for you even when you are not present. People talk, observe, and form opinions over time. If your behavior has been steady, your reputation becomes a reflection of that steadiness. This means opportunities, trust, and respect begin to reach you without direct effort. You are no longer proving yourself in every room because your name has already carried the message. At its core, earning respect through consistent behavior is about alignment between intention and action repeated over time. It is about showing up the same way, holding the same standards, and making decisions based on principles rather than emotions. It is quiet, often unnoticed in the moment, but incredibly powerful in the long run because it shapes perception in a way that words never can. Emotional discipline is one of the most powerful psychological signals you can send to the world because it reveals something deeper than words ever could. It reveals control. Not control over others, but control over yourself. And in human behavior, the person who controls themselves is often perceived as the one who holds the highest level of power. Every interaction you have is not just about what is being said, but about how you respond internally and externally. People are constantly observing your reactions, especially in moments of tension, disagreement, or unpredictability. These are the moments where your emotional patterns become visible, and once visible, they become part of your identity in the eyes of others. If you react impulsively, show frustration easily, or allow emotions to dictate your behavior, you signal vulnerability in a way that reduces perceived authority. On the other hand, when you remain composed, measured, and grounded, you send a completely different message, one of stability and strength. The human brain naturally associates calmness with competence. When someone is able to maintain emotional balance under pressure, it creates an impression that they understand the situation better than others. This is not always about actual knowledge, but about perception. A calm individual appears to be in control, and control creates trust. People begin to feel that if things escalate, you will not add chaos to the situation. Instead, you will absorb it, manage it, and respond in a way that maintains order. There is also a neurological aspect to this. When emotions run high, the brain shifts into a reactive state, prioritizing immediate responses over thoughtful decision making. This is often referred to as an emotional override, where logic temporarily takes a back seat. When you lack emotional discipline, you operate in this reactive mode more often, which leads to inconsistent behavior, And as discussed earlier, inconsistency weakens respect. Emotional discipline, on the other hand, allows you to pause, process, and respond intentionally rather than react impulsively. That pause is where power exists. It may only last a few seconds, but it changes everything. It gives you the space to choose your response instead of being controlled by your immediate feelings. Most people do not create this space. They react instantly, driven by emotion, and in doing so, they give away control. The person who can hold that space, who can delay their reaction and respond with clarity, automatically stands out. Another important aspect is how emotional discipline influences social dynamics. In any group setting, emotions tend to spread quickly. If one person becomes anxious, angry, or defensive, it often triggers similar reactions in others. This is known as emotional contagion. However, the reverse is also true. A calm, composed individual can stabilize the emotional tone of an entire group. When you maintain control, you indirectly influence others to regulate themselves as well. This positions you as a stabilizing force, someone who can be relied upon when situations become uncertain. People respect those who do not escalate situations unnecessarily. It shows maturity and awareness. It shows that you are not easily provoked, not easily shaken, and not easily manipulated. This is particularly important because many social interactions involve subtle tests. People may challenge you, question you, or even provoke you to see how you respond. These tests are often unconscious, but they serve a purpose. They help others determine your boundaries and your level of self-control. If you react emotionally, you fail the test. If you remain composed, you pass it without needing to say a word. Emotional discipline also protects your energy. When you react to everything, you exhaust yourself. You become mentally and emotionally drained because you are constantly engaging with external triggers. Over time, this reduces your ability to think clearly and act effectively. By choosing what deserves your emotional response and what does not, you conserve your energy for situations that truly matter. This selective engagement is a sign of strength, not detachment. It shows that you are intentional with your focus and not easily pulled into distractions. There is also a deeper layer related to self-awareness. Emotional discipline requires you to understand your own triggers, patterns, and tendencies. It is not about suppressing emotions, but about recognizing them without being controlled by them. Suppression can lead to internal tension, while awareness leads to control. When you are aware of what you are feeling and why, you gain the ability to manage those emotions effectively. This creates a sense of inner stability that others can feel, even if they cannot fully explain it. People are naturally drawn to those who feel grounded. It creates a sense of safety in interactions. When someone knows that you will not overreact, misinterpret, or create unnecessary conflict, they are more comfortable engaging with you. This comfort evolves into respect because it is based on repeated experiences of stability. Over time, your presence becomes associated with clarity and balance, and that association shapes how others perceive and treat you. Emotional discipline also enhances your communication. When you are not overwhelmed by emotion, you are able to listen more effectively, respond more thoughtfully, and express yourself more clearly. This improves the quality of your interactions and reduces misunderstandings. People begin to see you as someone who can handle complex conversations without losing control, which further strengthens your credibility. It is important to recognize that emotional discipline is not about being emotionless. It is about being intentional. You still feel everything: frustration, excitement, disappointment, but you do not allow those emotions to dictate your actions in a way that undermines your long-term goals or your identity. This distinction is crucial because it separates strength from suppression. True discipline is flexible, not rigid. It adapts to the situation while maintaining core stability. Over time, emotional discipline becomes part of your reputation. People begin to expect a certain level of composure from you. They trust that you will not react unpredictably, and this trust elevates your position in any social or professional environment. You are seen as someone who can handle responsibility, navigate challenges, and maintain control even when others cannot. This is where the real power lies, not in dominating conversations, not in forcing outcomes, but in mastering your internal state so completely that your external presence becomes naturally commanding. When you achieve this level of control, respect is no longer something you have to pursue because your behavior consistently communicates strength, stability, and awareness in a way that others cannot ignore. Self-respect is the invisible force that shapes every interaction you have because it determines the standard you operate on before anyone else even gets involved. It is not something you announce or display through words. It is something people detect through your behavior, your boundaries, and the way you carry yourself in both small and significant moments. Psychology shows that people rarely decide how to treat you randomly. Instead, they take cues from how you treat yourself, and then they adjust their behavior to match that signal. At a subconscious level, human beings are constantly looking for reference points. When someone meets you, they are trying to understand your value, your confidence, and your limits. They do this not by asking direct questions, but by observing your reactions, your decisions, and your tolerance for certain behaviors. If you demonstrate that you value your time, your energy, and your well-being, others begin to recognize that value as well. If you demonstrate the opposite by accepting disrespect, overextending yourself, or seeking validation, people unconsciously lower the level of respect they offer in return. This process is closely tied to a concept in psychology known as mirroring. People tend to reflect the attitudes and behaviors they observe. If you approach yourself with discipline, care, and confidence, that attitude becomes the baseline for how others interact with you. It is not because they are consciously deciding to respect you, but because your behavior has set a clear standard. On the other hand, if you consistently undermine your own worth by speaking negatively about yourself, failing to set boundaries, or allowing others to disregard your needs, you create a different standard, one that invites similar treatment from those around you. Boundaries play a central role in self-respect. They define what you accept and what you do not, and they communicate that definition without the need for explanation. When you set and maintain boundaries, you are essentially telling others that your time, your energy, and your values are not negotiable. This does not require aggression or confrontation. In fact, the most effective boundaries are often quiet and consistent. You simply choose not to engage in situations that do not align with your standards, and over time, people learn where those limits exist. Many people struggle with boundaries because they fear rejection or conflict. They worry that saying no will make them less likable or less accepted. However, psychology suggests the opposite. When you lack boundaries, you may gain short-term approval, but you lose long-term respect. People may take advantage of your willingness to accommodate, but they do not see you as someone who holds authority over their own life. In contrast, when you are selective and intentional with your time and energy, you may face occasional resistance, but you gain a deeper level of respect because you are seen as someone who cannot be easily influenced or controlled. Self-respect is also reflected in the way you make decisions. When you prioritize your values over immediate comfort or external validation, you reinforce your sense of identity. This creates internal alignment where your actions are consistent with what you believe is right for you. That alignment is noticeable. People can sense when someone is acting out of conviction versus when they are acting out of pressure or insecurity. Conviction carries weight because it signals that your behavior is not easily swayed by external factors. Another important aspect is how you respond to mistreatment. When someone crosses a line, your reaction sets a precedent. If you ignore it without addressing it, or if you continue to engage without adjusting your behavior, you signal that the action was acceptable. This does not mean you need to react emotionally or aggressively. In fact, the most powerful response is often calm and decisive. You simply withdraw your engagement, adjust your level of access, or communicate your boundary clearly. This response demonstrates that you are aware of your worth and unwilling to compromise it. Self-respect also influences your body language, tone of voice, and overall presence. These nonverbal cues often communicate more than words. Standing with confidence, maintaining eye contact, speaking clearly, and moving with intention all signal that you are comfortable with yourself. These signals are picked up almost instantly by others and shape their perception before any conversation even begins. When your external behavior aligns with internal confidence, it creates a consistent message that reinforces respect. There is also a long-term effect that develops over time. As you consistently act with self-respect, you build a reputation. People begin to understand that you operate at a certain standard and that interacting with you requires meeting that standard. This does not make you distant or unapproachable. Instead, it creates clarity. Others know what to expect, and this predictability fosters a form of respect that is both stable and enduring. It is important to recognize that self-respect is not about superiority or ego. It is not about placing yourself above others or demanding special treatment. It is about recognizing your own value and acting in a way that reflects that recognition. True self-respect is quiet and grounded. It does not need validation because it is internally defined. This internal definition is what makes it so powerful because it is not dependent on external approval. Another layer to consider is how self-respect affects your choices in relationships, work, and daily life. When you respect yourself, you are more likely to choose environments and people that align with your values. You are less likely to tolerate situations that drain you or compromise your well-being. This selective approach improves the quality of your experiences and reinforces your sense of control over your life. That control is visible to others and contributes to the respect you receive. Self-respect also creates resilience. When your sense of worth is internally grounded, it is less affected by external criticism or setbacks. You are able to handle challenges without losing your sense of identity. This stability makes you more reliable and consistent, which further strengthens how others perceive you. People respect those who remain steady even when circumstances are not ideal. Ultimately, self-respect is the foundation upon which all other forms of respect are built. It determines the signals you send, the standards you uphold, and the way you navigate interactions. When you consistently demonstrate that you value yourself, others adjust their behavior to match that value. It is not something you need to demand or explain because it is communicated through every decision, every boundary, and every action you take, creating a clear and undeniable standard that shapes how the world responds to you. Attention is one of the most powerful and underestimated forms of currency in human interaction because it directly influences how value is perceived. What you give your attention to and how freely you give it sends a constant signal to others about what matters to you and, more importantly, about your own level of self-worth. In psychology, scarcity increases perceived value And this principle applies not only to physical resources, but also to intangible ones like time, focus, and emotional investment. When attention is given without limits, it loses its impact. If you are always available, always responsive, and always engaged with everything and everyone, your presence becomes predictable in a way that reduces its significance. People begin to take it for granted because there is no cost associated with accessing it. On the other hand, when your attention is selective and intentional, it becomes more meaningful. People recognize that your time and focus are not easily obtained, and this creates a subtle shift in how they perceive you. This does not mean becoming distant or unapproachable. It means being deliberate. There is a difference between being present and being overavailable. Being present means that when you engage, you are fully focused, attentive, and aware. Being overavailable means that you are constantly accessible, regardless of the situation or its importance. The former creates depth in interactions, while the latter dilutes it. The human brain naturally associates scarcity with importance. When something is limited, it is perceived as more valuable because it cannot be easily replaced. This is why selective attention carries weight. When you choose where to direct your focus, you are implicitly communicating priorities. People notice where your attention goes, and they interpret that as a reflection of what you consider worthy. If you give the same level of attention to everything, there is no distinction, and without distinction, there is no hierarchy of value. Another psychological factor at play is reinforcement. When you consistently respond to every message immediately, engage in every conversation, and react to every situation, you train others to expect that level of access. This creates a pattern where your attention is assumed rather than appreciated. Breaking this pattern requires intentional control. By choosing when and how you engage, you reset expectations and establish a new standard where your attention is earned rather than automatically given. There is also a connection between attention and emotional energy. Every interaction requires a certain level of mental and emotional investment. If you spread your attention too thin, you reduce the quality of that investment. Conversations become shallow, responses become automatic, and your presence becomes less impactful. When you focus your attention more selectively, you increase the depth and quality of your interactions. People can feel the difference between distracted engagement and genuine presence, and they naturally respect the latter more. Control over attention also protects you from unnecessary distractions. In a world filled with constant stimuli, messages, notifications, opinions, and demands, your ability to filter what deserves your focus becomes a critical skill. Without this filter, you become reactive, constantly shifting your attention based on external inputs. This reduces your sense of control and makes your behavior less intentional. When you manage your attention effectively, you maintain control over your environment rather than being controlled by it. Another important aspect is how attention relates to status perception. People often associate high status with individuals who are not easily accessible. This is not about exclusivity for the sake of ego, but about signaling that your time and focus are directed toward meaningful priorities. When you are selective, it suggests that you have standards and that your attention is aligned with those standards. This creates a perception of importance, not because you are trying to appear important, but because your behavior reflects a clear sense of direction. It is also worth noting that attention is closely tied to validation. When you give attention freely in an attempt to gain approval or recognition, it can have the opposite effect. It signals a need for external validation, which reduces perceived confidence. In contrast, when your attention is not driven by the need for approval, but by genuine interest or intention, It reflects internal confidence. People respect those who are not constantly seeking validation because it suggests that their sense of worth is self-defined. Another layer to consider is the impact of attention on communication dynamics. When you listen carefully, respond thoughtfully, and engage with intention, you elevate the quality of the interaction. However, this level of engagement should not be given indiscriminately. By reserving your full attention for meaningful conversations and important situations, you create a contrast that makes those moments more impactful. People notice when they have your full focus, especially if it is not something you give to everyone. Attention also shapes your personal environment. What you focus on consistently influences your thoughts, your emotions, and your decisions. If your attention is constantly drawn to negativity, distractions, or low value interactions, it affects your mindset and reduces your ability to operate at a high level. By consciously directing your attention toward what aligns with your goals and values, you create a more focused and productive mental space. This internal clarity is reflected externally, and it contributes to how others perceive you. There is also a long-term effect of controlled attention. Over time, people begin to recognize patterns in your behavior. They notice that you are not easily distracted, that you do not engage in unnecessary conflict, and that your focus is directed toward meaningful outcomes. This creates a reputation of discipline and intentionality. People start to see you as someone who values their time and energy, and they adjust their behavior accordingly. It is important to understand that controlling your attention is not about ignoring people or avoiding interaction. It is about prioritization. Not everything requires your response, and not everyone requires your full engagement. By making conscious choices about where your attention goes, you create a structure that supports both your personal growth and your social presence. When your attention is aligned with your values, your actions become more consistent, your interactions become more meaningful, and your presence becomes more impactful. People begin to recognize that your focus is not random or reactive, but deliberate and controlled. This recognition shapes how they interact with you, how they value your time, and ultimately how they respect you, because attention, when used intentionally, becomes a powerful signal of self-awareness, discipline, and purpose that cannot be easily overlooked. Clarity is one of the most underrated sources of confidence, yet it is the foundation upon which true presence is built. Most people think confidence comes from external validation, achievements, or the ability to project strength in the moment. But psychology reveals something deeper. Confidence is not created by noise, by talking more, or by trying to dominate situations. It is created by knowing exactly who you are, what you stand for, and where you are going. When that internal picture is clear, your external behavior naturally aligns, and that alignment is what people perceive as confidence. The human mind is constantly seeking certainty. When you interact with someone who is unsure of themselves, it creates a sense of instability. Their words may change, their decisions may shift, and their behavior may feel inconsistent. This uncertainty forces others to question their reliability and credibility. On the other hand, when someone operates with clarity, their actions become predictable in a positive way. People know what to expect, and that predictability creates trust. Trust then evolves into respect because it removes doubt from the interaction. Clarity begins with self-understanding. It requires you to define your values, your priorities, and your boundaries. Without this internal framework, decisions become reactive rather than intentional. You start to rely on external opinions, social pressure, or temporary emotions to guide your actions. This leads to inconsistency, which weakens your presence. When you are clear about what matters to you, Decision-making becomes more straightforward. You are not constantly weighing every option based on how others might perceive it. Instead, you filter choices through your own standards, which creates a sense of stability in your behavior. This stability is immediately noticeable. People can sense when someone is grounded in their identity. It shows in the way you speak, the way you move, and the way you respond to situations. There is less hesitation, less over-explaining, and less need to justify your actions. Not because you are dismissive, but because you are certain. Certainty does not mean arrogance. It means alignment. It means your thoughts, words, and actions are all pointing in the same direction. Another important aspect of clarity is direction. Knowing where you are going gives your actions purpose. Without direction, effort becomes scattered. You may work hard, but your energy is divided across too many areas, which reduces its impact. When you have a clear direction, your focus becomes concentrated. You begin to prioritize what aligns with your goals and eliminate what does not. This creates efficiency in your behavior, and efficiency is often perceived as competence. People respect those who move with purpose. It signals that you are not just reacting to life, but actively shaping it. This does not require you to have every detail figured out, but it does require a general sense of direction. Even a simple understanding of your next steps creates momentum, and that momentum reinforces your confidence. As you take action and see progress, your belief in yourself strengthens, creating a cycle where clarity leads to action and action reinforces clarity. Clarity also reduces internal conflict. When you are unsure of your values or direction, you experience hesitation and doubt. You may second-guess your decisions, seek constant reassurance, or change your stance based on external feedback. This internal conflict often manifests externally as inconsistency or lack of confidence. When you are clear, these conflicts diminish. You make decisions more quickly and you stand by them with greater conviction. This decisiveness is interpreted as strength, even if the decision itself is not perfect. Communication is another area where clarity plays a critical role. When your thoughts are organized and your intentions are clear, your communication becomes more effective. You express yourself in a way that is direct and easy to understand. There is less confusion, less ambiguity, and fewer misunderstandings. People are more likely to listen and engage when your message is clear because it requires less effort to process. This enhances your influence without requiring you to speak more or louder. There is also a psychological comfort that comes from interacting with someone who has clarity. It reduces uncertainty in the interaction. Others do not have to guess your intentions or interpret mixed signals. This creates a smoother dynamic where trust can develop more easily. Over time, this trust contributes to a deeper level of respect because it is built on consistent and clear interactions. Clarity is also closely tied to discipline. Maintaining a clear sense of identity and direction requires you to filter out distractions and stay aligned with your priorities. This is not always easy, especially in environments where there are constant influences pulling your attention in different directions. However, the ability to stay focused on what matters reinforces your sense of control. This control is visible to others and contributes to how they perceive your strength. Another layer to consider is how clarity affects your response to challenges. When you know what you stand for and where you are going, obstacles become easier to navigate. You are less likely to be derailed by temporary setbacks because your direction provides context. Instead of reacting emotionally, you assess the situation based on how it fits into your overall path. This creates a more measured and strategic approach to problem solving, which further enhances your credibility. Clarity also eliminates the need for excessive validation. When you are unsure of yourself, you often look to others for confirmation that you are on the right path. This can lead to over-explaining, seeking approval, or adjusting your behavior to fit expectations. When you are clear, this need diminishes. You may still consider feedback, but it does not define your decisions. This independence is often interpreted as confidence because it shows that your sense of direction is internally driven. Over time, clarity shapes your reputation. People begin to associate you with decisiveness, purpose, and consistency. They recognize that you are not easily influenced by external noise and that your actions are guided by a clear internal framework. This reputation reinforces itself as others begin to trust your judgment and respect your presence. It is important to understand that clarity is not a one-time achievement. It is an ongoing process. As you grow and experience new situations, your understanding of yourself and your goals may evolve. The key is to continuously refine your perspective so that your actions remain aligned with your current values and direction. This adaptability, combined with a strong sense of identity, creates a balance between flexibility and stability. When clarity is present, confidence becomes a natural byproduct. You no longer need to force it or project it artificially. It emerges from the alignment between your internal understanding and your external behavior. People recognize this alignment, even if they cannot articulate it. It shows in your consistency, your decisiveness, and your ability to navigate situations without unnecessary hesitation, creating a presence that feels grounded, intentional, and unmistakably strong.